All right, so welcome you guys. I'm gonna share my screen here. One second. There we are. And then I gotta get this thing so that it's, view this as slides. Bear with me here, slideshow. There's the slideshow. Can everybody see this? Can you see the slideshow? I'm gonna assume that you are seeing that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, well, welcome you guys to the life-changing magic of self-forgiveness. Feel better, manifest more, and transform the voice of self-doubt into your biggest asset. I'm Amy Pearson from beingamytheblog.com. And before I talk too much more about myself, I want everyone to make sure you're in the right place. So this is a call for you. If we're honest, we're being honest, a lot of times people get on your nerves. And not only that, but you get on your nerves. And honestly, you can be a little hard on yourself inside your own head. You wish you knew the secret to more energy, inspiration, and motivation. You spend more time than you are willing to admit wishing for approval and secretly have a fear of any kind of judgment, criticism, or blame. And you have been known to spend money on mentors, coaches, accountability programs, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it's helpful, but it's temporary. It doesn't seem to last and after the program is over. So those are a few things you can kind of self-identify if any of that, if you relate to any of that. And some of the things that we are going to cover today, we're going to talk about why you're really so exhausted. We're going to talk about the secret to more energy, inspiration, and motivation. We're going to talk about how people really are your greatest teachers. You've heard that expression, right? That people are our greatest teachers. And I've always been like, what does that mean? So I'm going to break that down for you. We're going to talk about what's really behind approval seeking that no one is really talking about. And then why negative self-talk is not normal and what to do about it. And then the key to success beyond limits. It's your inner mentor, and I'm going to show you how to access her. So after today, you're going to learn how to actually use irritating people as your teachers. You're going to stop beating the crap out of yourself in your head and access the wise mentor inside of you. You're going to magnify your creativity, your confidence, your energy, and your motivation. You're going to learn some simple mindset tweaks you can use to deal with discouragement and self-doubt so you can feel better and stop hiding and step into higher and higher levels of success. And I'm going to share with you a one-of-a-kind process that is going to help you end the shame cycle that has you self-medicating, approval-seeking, and or blaming yourself and other people. And by the way, this process came from the inspiration that I was able to access through the exact tool that I'm going to be teaching today. So that's pretty exciting. So let's talk a little bit about me. So hi, my name is Amy Pearson, and I am a recovering approval addict with the occasional relapse, although I will say that those relapses are fewer and far between now that I have the forgiveness process that I'm going to be sharing with you today. I'm a master certified life coach and instructor. I've been master certified for 8 years. I've been certified for 10. I've been teaching on behalf of my mentor, Martha Beck, as an instructor in her program for probably about 8 years. Before being amytheblog.com, I was over at Live Brazen, and that was a business that was bringing in over $200,000 in revenue. I've been featured in Huffington Post. I've been featured by Martha Beck on her blog, Maria Shriver. I've participated in some high-profile events, including Tommy Rosen's Recovery 2.0 series. I was interviewed on Awaken Radio, which at the time was the #1 spirituality podcast on the internet. I averaged about 15 talks per year. I took a break, probably a year-long break. And during that break, I wrote a book. It's a memoir called Forgiving Amy, and I'm in the final touches, finishing up that book by the end of this year. But during that process of writing the book, I was given, I'll say more about why I say I was given this process, the forgiveness process. And so that is what this is the first time I have shared, this is the first time that I have taught this. So I'm very, very excited to share it with you. So Little Women. Okay, Little Women, I know we saw that it was nominated. It was nominated for an Academy Award. This book has been around since the turn of the century. What does this have to do with me and the forgiveness process? So when I was a little girl, my grandmother, there she is. This is my maternal grandmother, Grandma Margie. She gave me this book as a gift because I was named Amy after Amy Marsh in Little Women. The problem was that I really couldn't stand that character. So I never got past the first chapter. And then recently, as I was kind of writing my own stories, my memoir, I decided it was time for me to finally finish this book. So as I read the book, I just got more and more triggered and more annoyed, not only with Amy, my namesake, but all of the characters. And one night I was reading the book, and then all of a sudden, it sort of hit me like a bolt of lightning that this wasn't a gift from my grandmother that was that was meant for me as a little girl. It was actually this posthumous gift that was intended for me now as an adult. So my grandmother, through this book, was really showing me the entirety of myself, using Amy and her sisters as the lens. Because every time I felt irritated by Amy, I realized in that moment that I was pushing away some part of myself. So one of the first descriptions that I encountered in the book about my namesake goes like, Amy, though she was the youngest, was a most important person in her own opinion, at least. I was judging her for being self-absorbed, conceited, vain. But what I was realizing is that as I was writing my own stories in my memoir, I could be pretty self-absorbed. She wasn't the only one that was self-absorbed. I could be pretty self-absorbed. So all the things I judged in Amy and her sister were actually opportunities for me to see the truth about myself, to accept and forgive parts of myself that really I had been pushing away, that I had been denying, that I had been hiding from. So it was an opportunity for me to absorb the shadow into the light and become whole. So Little Women was a gift from my grandmother that allowed me to forgive Amy. So we're going to talk more, because what happened after I had this awareness was I created a decision tree. And hopefully you got that in your email today. And it's a handout. You don't necessarily need it, but it might be handy for you to refer to. And if you didn't get it, I can always send it to you after the fact. So what does the word forgive mean? If you look it up in the dictionary, to forgive is to stop feeling angry or resentful at someone for an offense, flaw, or mistake. So there are scientific benefits to forgiveness. We're talking about forgiveness in general. Research shows that it lowers blood pressure, heart rate, it decreases risk of alcohol and drug abuse, lowers the risk of depression, chronic pain, builds the immune system, lowers the stress hormone in the body, it improves relationships, it improves spiritual well-being. So this stuff is grounded in science. So what about self-forgiveness? First of all, do you even need to forgive yourself? Let's talk about that for a minute. So there are a few things, there are a few questions here that I put together to help you to kind of determine if you need to forgive yourself. So you can kind of check this out. Do you ever wish that you could be more like someone else? Do you ever look in the mirror and not like what you see? Do you ever feel like you need to prove yourself? Do you ever beat yourself up for making a bad choice? Do you ever say or do things that you're ashamed about later? Do you have regrets? Do you wish you were different? Have you ever wished you were smarter, a better mom, more successful, younger, skinnier? Okay, so those are some things, some questions about that. Or another way to kind of know that you need to forgive yourself is less obvious. One second here. Do you get triggered? Do other people trigger you. Okay, we're going to break that down. So that's another example. And if you're triggered by other people, I mean, we're human beings, most of us do get triggered, then that is an indicator that you are going to benefit from learning from the people that trigger you. So the forgiveness process is this process that I came up with, and it's beautiful because it works with any self-development tool or healing modality. It's easy to learn, and thanks to other people, there are lots and lots of opportunities to use it. So some of the benefits from self-forgiveness, you can just add these on to those proven benefits that we talked about early in terms of your health and your emotional well-being. But let's add self-forgiveness to the mix. So with self-forgiveness, you can look forward to stop wasting time and energy consumed by that inner voice that judges and rejects, and learn how to mentor yourself and others. You can look forward to stop wasting time and energy compensating for your perceived flaws. You can create the space for genuine inspiration and creativity based on an integrated self, not one fragmented by self-loathing. Wouldn't we all love to operate from that space where we are in genuine love with ourselves? We can create the possibility to achieve that genuine success based on that solid foundation of love. We can become the mentor we have always wished for. We can heal ourselves, and this is what I get really excited about. And in the process, we create a more compassionate home, a more compassionate community, a more compassionate world. Isn't that what we need right now? So let's keep going. We can't talk about self-forgiveness without first talking about shame. So all of our favorite shame researcher, good old Brene Brown, she says, if you put shame in a petri dish, it needs secrecy, silence, and judgment to grow exponentially. The root of the word shame is to cover. So how do we cover shame, and why does this all matter? First of all, here's a photo of me. This came I think I took this about 7, maybe 8 years ago before I stopped drinking. I use this photo because this is a perfect example of one of the things that we do to cover our shame. So we do this thing called buffer. I learned that word from Brooke Castillo, who's another really fantastic life coach. She talks about buffering, and really what she means is this is a way to escape the pain of shame through instant gratification sources of pleasure. So here I am, I just purchased that black tube dress. I'm drinking a Kir Royale, and I'm about to embark on a fabulous meal. You know, those things are not bad in themselves. We're talking about using those things as a way to distract ourselves from the pain of feeling ashamed. Okay, so those were my top 3 ways to buffer. I distracted myself from shame by drinking alcohol, by shopping, and by eating. But there are other ways, right? There's smoking, there's other kinds of drugs, there's sleeping, you know, there's creating drama, there's, you know, sex. These are all things that in and of themselves, not necessarily bad. Well, drug abuse is bad, but you get what I'm saying. It's when we use it to distract ourselves from shame. And what it does is it creates a shame spiral, because you're ashamed, you feel bad, and then you do something to cover the shame, like drink alcohol. That causes you to feel even worse about yourself, and then you're back to doing more things to cover the shame. It's a negative shame spiral. Okay, another thing that we do to cover our shame is we judge ourselves, right? This is where that inner voice, that aggressive, violent voice of self-doubt comes in and just beats the crap out of ourselves sometimes. Or what we will do is we will deny our shame by putting it onto other people, right? People are our mirrors. And so Brene says we judge people in areas where we are the most vulnerable to shame. So we're going to break this down. I'm going to unpack this for you. But what we need to understand is that that is what gets us into trouble. That is what is creating so much of our problems today, right? This escalates into us versus them. We justify all kinds of violence, all kinds of abuse to ourselves and to other people. And so that is the shame cycle, right? We separate ourselves from others, and then we put our shame onto others by blaming, rejecting, and then that justifies all kinds of negative behaviors. This is where you start to see road rage. This is where you start to see verbal abuse. This is where governments governments can excuse themselves for separating children from families and locking them up into cages. This is war. So we create this shame cycle. The more we do bad things to cover shame, the more we try to cover our shame through the buffering and through the objectification and through the violence. So this is where things escalate. So let's talk about approval addiction, right? Because I said I am a recovering approval addict with the occasional relapse, fewer and far between. For most of my life, I've had an obsession with really getting people to approve of me, and also an obsessive fear with rejection, any kind of judgment, any kind of criticism, any kind of blame. And I thought that my addiction to other people's approval was the root of my problems. And what I have learned, and this is the first time I've shared this, is that underneath my addiction to approval was something way deeper. Not a lot of people are talking about this. And what it is that underneath all of it is shame. We want approval from other people because inside we're not approving of ourselves. If we can get as many people as possible to see us in a positive light, we think we can see ourselves in a positive light. If people reject us, then our worst fear is confirmed. We are not fit for human consumption. We are not worthy. We are not lovable. What I've learned is that this addiction to approval is not so much a fear of what other people think, but it's a fear of our own thinking, because other people are simply our mirrors. If they like me, I can like me. If they don't like me, then I can't like me. My obsession with approval was this inner cry for self-love, understanding, forgiveness, and compassion. And my fear of rejection was the fear of external reminders of my own shame, things I didn't want to see, things that I wanted to forget, things that I wanted to bury and cover up. So what we do is we cope with shame by seeking approval from other people, because if we can get them to approve of us, then we don't have to be reminded of our own shame. And then we avoid rejection, because if they don't approve of me, then I have to face my shame. So then I'm gonna buffer and I'm gonna blame. So that is how it works. Now, before we get into the approval process, I've got a few disclaimers. This work is going to require you to be so brave, because what I'm asking you to do right now is I'm asking you, remember I told you the definition of forgiveness is to stop feeling angry or resentful at someone for an offense, flaw, or mistake. What I am asking you to do is to turn towards yourself and to be willing to look at your own offenses, your own perceived flaws, your own mistakes. You have to be willing to go there. You have to be willing to face your shame. That's the shame that you have been working really hard to hide. And so now we are going to share, we're going to shed some light. We're going to shine some light on that stuff. Okay, the next thing you need to be is you need to be intentional here, because often when we're triggered, right, we have knee-jerk reactions, right? When we're triggered by other people, we want to judge them. We want to make them wrong. We want to point fingers. We want to be in the right, okay? Or we want to go grab a piece of cake, or we want to go shopping, or we want to go get that Kir Royale. So what I'm asking you to do is to stop with the knee-jerk reactions, okay? Put the fork down, put your credit card down, and stop pointing your finger. Stop worrying about being right. That is another way of seeking validation. If you're right in an argument, if you get the last word, if you're able to make that other person wrong, then you can feel better about yourself. I want you to see that that's just another way of coping with a shame that is deep down within you. So be intentional, be willing to look. And then the last is, I want you to just hold on to that curiosity, okay? Be willing to be curious. If you're triggered, if you're approval seeking, if you're wanting to buffer, stop and just be curious and ask yourself, what is going on here? What is going on? What is going on underneath what I think is obvious? Okay, so remember, our friend Amy Marsh, self-absorbed, conceited, a snob. Well, I was brave and I stopped judging her and I started to get curious. I thought about my own childhood. I was born into a family where my mother and father were really locked in the worst of their alcohol addiction. I had 3 teenage sisters at the time who were tasked most of the time to take care of me and really were just kind of absorbed in their own survival. I had a little brother who had severe behavioral issues. I knew not to ask for too much. I knew not to make too much noise or cause any drama, to add any drama to an already chaotic situation. I was essentially invisible. This is why I judged Amy Marsh for saying that she was an important person, because I never felt important in my own life. And I was able to recognize through this curiosity, I was able to recognize a lifelong pattern, significance seeking. And I was able to overcome it. And the pattern that through my whole life, it kept coming up in different ways, sort of like a whack-a-mole. You know, it's like, oh, I'd see it show up in my relationships, and then I think I had addressed that. And then boom, there it is. It showed up in my business. I'm trying to prove myself. All this significance seeking, I couldn't figure out how to end the pattern. But what I know now is that I am absolutely indispensable. I am important, and I am as insignificant as a grain of sand in a vast stretch of beach. I am absolutely indispensable, and I am as insignificant, you heard me right, as a grain of sand in a vast expanse of beach. I came into the world this way, and so did you. So Deepak Chopra says, we are not in the world, but the world is within each of us. Neil Donald Walsh, who by the way lives in Ashland, says perfect love is to feeling what perfect white is to color. Many people think that white is the absence of color. It is not. It is the inclusion of all color. White is every other color that exists combined. So too is love not the absence of emotion, hatred, anger, lust, jealousy, but the summation of all feeling. It is the sum total, the aggregate amount, the everything. You are love. You are the sum total. You are the aggregate amount. You have everything inside you. Debbie Ford. She's obvious, you know, if you haven't read Debbie Ford, she is the master of the shadow. And she says, you possess every human characteristic and emotion, whether active or dormant, whether conscious or unconscious. There is nothing you can conceive that you are not. You are everything, that which you consider good and that which you consider bad. Okay, so what happens? Speaking of bad, why do we hide our shame? How does this get so hidden inside us? So here's my mom, and that's my little brother. And my mother was a single mother for many years. She supported 3 kids on her own, and she did it with her own paycheck. So you were not allowed to be lazy, right? That was not something that she would allow. And she was someone who was from a working class. So she did not like anyone who was too uppity. She did not like anyone who was too snobby. She was an introvert, and she had a thing for my dad, who was very social and very charming. So you start to see, right? We come from families that have developed over time certain values, right? One family's values can be totally different from another family's values. But whatever it is, we get messages from our families. We get messages from the TV. We get messages from church. We get messages from our teachers. We get messages from our peers who are learning their own values from their own families. And then we learn what is good, what is acceptable, what is fit for human conception, and what is bad. We learn we need to puff up about ourselves. And then we also learn what we need to pretend to be if we don't have those characteristics. We also learn what we have to hide away, what is not fit for human consumption. In my family, it was not okay to be quiet. It was not okay to be lazy. It was not okay to be uppity. It was not okay to be snobby. So those are some of the values that I was in, that I internalized. So what happens when we learn the difference between good and bad, and we start to internalize that? This is what happens. We become fragmented. All right, so look at these red, beautiful red balloons. Every one of your perceived flaws, your perceived offenses, or your mistakes, think of them as a helium balloon, a red helium balloon that you have been trying to hold. It's fully inflated, right? Full of helium. And you've been trying to hold this helium balloon underwater for your entire life. Not only one, you've been trying to hold a whole bouquet of red helium balloons underwater when you try to cover up your shame, those things that you have learned were not fit for human consumption, those mistakes that you don't want anyone to know about, those flaws that you compare yourself to others and see yourself coming up short. Can you imagine what that does to your energy? No wonder you're so freaking tired, okay? You are exhausted because you're holding helium balloons underwater. What do you think that does to your creativity? What do you think that's doing to your motivation? What is that doing to your ability to be inspired? Think of this energy, think of the energy that could be going into to new ideas, to writing a book, to starting a business, to running for office, for teaching a class, for marketing a program. All right, so let's talk about the forgiveness process. How does this work? All right, so you guys may or may not have a handout. I created a decision tree. I've decided that I'm going to teach, and you can follow along using the decision tree. And then if you need a copy of this, I can get it to you later. So the way that it works is really, it just starts with checking in, okay? Write this word down. It's very scientific. When you feel crappy, okay? That's my scientific word. If you're feeling crappy, the first thing you want to do is you want to ask yourself, am I triggered by someone else? Okay. Now, if the answer is no, again, we're going to put the fork down. We're going to put the credit card down. We are going to stop blaming and we're going to get curious. Okay. You're going to get curious about where it is that you're ashamed. Sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not. All right. So when you are noticing that you have shame, what you're going to ask yourself, you're going to get really curious. What are you resisting about yourself? So a couple days ago, I sent an email to my list and it was called Some Days Are Just a Shit Show. I described a day where I had totally spaced a meeting. In fact, I was so sure that the meeting wasn't that day that I actually sent the babysitter home. And then I got a call from this very annoyed person going, "Where were you?" On that same day, I completely lost my car keys, which were in my pocket because I put them there so that I wouldn't lose them. And I actually had to take a lift to get to the place where I was getting my hair done. When I was at the hairdresser, I actually broke down and I started to cry. All right, so that is one of those examples of when it's really obvious, right, what you're resisting about yourself. For me, I was super ashamed because I was so like I just didn't have my shit together. I was spacing everything out. I was making stupid mistakes. And you know, that was an example of when that shame that was really obvious. Now there are some times when you just have to get really curious. You feel crappy and you look inside and you're like, I'm not sure what's going on. So, you know, as an example, Amy Marsh, right? Like I had this lifelong pattern of significance seeking, approval seeking, and I had no idea what the heck was behind that. And it really wasn't until I started to get super curious about where I was triggered, and specifically around the character in Little Women, that I really started to see that this pattern came from this childhood where I did not feel important, and where I, you know, was really just searching for ways to feel important as an adult. And so Amy was really, you know, this character that allowed me to connect the dots. Okay. So there are times when it's going to be really obvious. There are going to be times when you're going to have to do some serious digging. All right. How does it work though? You're going to identify the shame, and you're going to resist that urge to buffer, right? To distract yourself from the pain of it. Or you're going to resist the urge to beat the crap out of yourself in your head, right? We're so violent sometimes to ourselves in our head, that blame, right? You're just so fucking stupid, or you're just so absent-minded. Why can't you get your shit together? Tell me I'm not alone, right? I know you guys are saying those things at times in different variations to yourself, and I'm saying stop. It needs to stop. And what you're going to do instead is you're going to accept that you are a fucking whole human being, that you possess the entire universe inside of you, and that sometimes you're a person who gets forgetful. You're going to forgive yourself for being a person who at times is really forgetful and does not have her shit together. I'm using my own example here. And then you're going to say, I'm integrated. I am whole. We are returning you back to your original state. This is the state that you were born as, a whole human being. And then you're going to say, just for good measure, I will no longer deny my humanity. Okay, this is the process, you guys. So now it gets a little more interesting because we're going to talk about other people. So if you are feeling crappy, there's that scientific word, then you're going to ask yourself, is it because I'm triggered? Now, we just talked about that part of the decision tree where it's not you being triggered by other people. It's because you did something yourself, right? That triggered your shame. But right now, we're going to talk about you being triggered by other people outside of you, okay? These people are going to help you uncover these parts of yourself that you have been hiding, right? This is your hidden shame. This is really difficult to get to unless you use this process, okay? Because this stuff, when you're triggered by other people, it's because you have shame that's been hidden so deep, it's hard to uncover. It's probably been hanging out underneath the surface of your awareness since you were a little kid and someone called you lazy or something. All right, so this is how other people are going to help us. First of all, though, in the decision tree, I asked this question. I ask, is it yours? Okay. Now, what I mean by that is sometimes people are just assholes. Okay. Sometimes you get cut off and someone flips you the finger. Sometimes someone steals your purse and then charges up your debit card. Sometimes someone smacks you. Sometimes you get raped. Sometimes you get verbally abused. Okay. And we're not going there, okay? This is not an opportunity for you to learn how to forgive yourself, okay? This is an opportunity for you to be militantly on your own side. Now, this is an opportunity for self-care. You know, if you are being abused in some way, whether it's, you know, it seems on the surface insignificant, like someone, you know, flipped you the finger on the road, to, the most extreme cases. We are talking about self-care. And my favorite definition of self-care comes from Christelle Nani. And she shares this in her book, Sacred Choices, which I highly recommend. And she says self-care is being authentic about your feelings, your needs and desires. It's about maintaining strong personal boundaries. It's the level of personal power you claim when you choose not to be a powerless victim who blames others for your situation, but rather you speak up and take care of yourself. It's the amount of leisure time you devote to yourself. It's the amount of discomfort you'll endure before speaking up. It's how much you judge, criticize, or berate yourself. It's how much you let negative people affect you. It's how willing are you to give your power away and let other opinions of you damage and lower your self-esteem? It's the level of self-forgiveness you afford yourself. See how all of this is so interconnected? But when you're triggered by someone else and they're doing something inappropriate, if they're being assholes, if there's abuse, then then we're talking about self-care. So if, on the other hand, you're triggered by someone else and it's yours, in other words, it's not someone abusing you, then I want you to, once again, be intentional and curious here. And I want you to start looking to see if this is a behavior that you could recognize in yourself. Maybe not exactly the same, but maybe it's there. Okay, so the other day, as an example, let's see. So if you're going to ask yourself, what was it? Okay, and so let's go back. The other day, well, first of all, 2 weeks ago, my dog died, and that was really hard for me. And my dad had called me, and I had been avoiding calling him back because I knew what he was going to tell me. He was going to tell me that I needed to go out and buy another dog. That's just what he believes. That's how he thinks I need to fix, it's a form of buffering, really, is just go out and buy another dog. It's a way to avoid a feeling, a painful feeling. And so I just didn't want to talk to him because I knew that was what he was going to say. Well, sure enough, about a week later, I did call him. And the first thing he said was, you need to go out and you need to go buy another dog, especially for your kids. And he wasn't very nice about it either. He just has a way about him. He's very kind of in your face with his opinions, even if he thinks he's helping. And I got off that call and I was extremely triggered. And it would have been really easy for me to go buy some chocolate malt balls or, curse him in my mind. But instead, I got curious. I was brave and I was intentional, and I looked and I saw that at times, because what I identified was that he was inserting his own view. He was seeing his view as right, and he wasn't taking into account, he had really, really no interest at all at what my opinion would be or what I wanted. And so I saw that he was just being, what's the word? It was just like, I guess insensitive, maybe? I don't know if that's the right word. But what I saw was that he was being insensitive by inserting his own point of view into my situation without really me asking. So I got curious, and sure enough, I found that I can absolutely be that same way. In fact, I probably learned that behavior from him. Especially with my husband. I mean, I'm the worst with my husband. It's like, I think I know everything. My kids, they say I'm a mom-splainer. Like I mom-splain to them. So I'm doing this all the time in my own family unit to my own husband. And, my kids, they joke about it, but I think, it's probably something that they see that I do. But I could identify that, yes, I insert my own point of view with that and think that I'm right, and I don't listen to anybody else's perspective. That happens in my household. And so I saw the behavior. I recognized my dad's behavior in me. And here's what I did, because I recognized that I am a whole human being, right? And sometimes I can be a really sensitive, empathic, healer. I can be amazing. But there are some times when I interject my own viewpoint and I demand that other people see it my way, and I don't care about their viewpoint in the matter. I do that too. And so what I did was I said, I forgive myself for being a person who is insensitive to other people's feelings. I forgive myself. I accept that that is a part of me. Otherwise, what you resist, you guys, it persists. So I acknowledge that I am integrated and I am whole, and I will not hide from my humanity. We are ending the shame cycle here, you guys. There is nothing wrong with being a whole human being. All right, and then the next thing that I recommend that you do is really powerful is you journal about it. Get really curious about what is going on that what's behind, what's underneath this behavior. What is when I'm writing a scene for my book, one of the things that you do when you're writing a scene is you ask yourself, what is the need? What is the goal of the protagonist? So here you want to see yourself as the protagonist in your own story. You can write about her. What is her need? What is her goal? What is not being met? And then you can give yourself some kind of gift that symbolizes that need. Now, I don't mean a physical material gift. I mean, you can just send her like something in your mind's eye, some gift that symbolizes this need being met. For me, this comes back to that need to feel important, the need to be heard, the need to be listened to, the need to be respected. And once I can identify that that was the need underneath my demanding my own viewpoint, then I can start to give myself the gift of respecting myself. So let's keep going. All right, so now this just gets really interesting, okay? So sometimes when you identify either that you're triggered by someone else, sometimes you are not able to recognize that behavior in yourself. So this becomes really interesting. What you want to do in these situations. So let me just share an example. So one of my clients, we were having a conversation, and she was noticing that she was being really triggered by a work colleague who was acting arrogant. Okay. And so I asked her to identify what the positive side of arrogance would be. Like, what would be the acceptable kind of on the spectrum of arrogance? What would be the acceptable side of that behavior? What would be the light side of that behavior? And she said self-confidence. So then we talked about this a little bit, and what we realized was that in her family, she was never really allowed to get too big for her britches, right? She was not allowed to be proud of herself. That was not something that her family allowed in her, right? And this is very common, right, for us women. Don't get too big for your britches. Don't get too cocky. Don't get too high and mighty. We hear it all the time. And so she had never allowed herself to be proud of herself. She, as an adult, still could not admit or even identify when she was proud of herself. And so this is the process. If you identify that you are triggered by someone else, but you do not recognize that behavior in you, then you want to get curious about what would be the light side of that behavior. What is the acceptable or more positive side of that behavior? And then you want to ask yourself, where have I been told in some way that I could not exhibit that light side of the behavior? You want to go back to a time maybe when you absorbed a message like that. This is going to be a time when you can journal. You can try and you can try to go back to maybe a time when you were told not to be confident. And we're using confidence as an example here. And you can journal about it. What was the need that was not being met? Give yourself a symbol to show yourself that that need is being met. So, and then the last thing that you want to do is, again, you want to say, I am an integrated person, and it's okay and it's safe for me to be XYZ. In this situation, in this example, it's okay and it's safe for me to be proud of myself. It's okay and safe for me to be self-confident. I can learn to express this quality in a positive way. I will no longer deny my humanity. All right, so again, you guys, if you have questions, I'm going to continue, but if you have questions, keep posting them to the chat. I'm not able to access it right now, but I'm going to stick around, okay? So this is really interesting because this is how we suppress our light, okay? So in the case of my client, an incredibly powerful, powerhouse individual, her whole life, she was suppressing her light. She was suppressing her ability to be proud of herself, to own her fabulousness, and to be self-confident. So being triggered by other people, especially when you don't identify the behavior in yourself, can show you where you are actually suppressing your own light. Pretty cool. Remember the benefits of forgiveness. We talked about these. These are scientific benefits for forgiveness. What else? When we're talking about the forgiveness process, you can add all of those health and emotional benefits, but you can add energy, you can add vitality, you can add motivation, inspiration, because you're no longer holding those red balloons underwater. Remember, what you resist persists. You are going to continue in the shame cycle, and you're going to continue those old patterns, and they're just going to keep coming up like whack-a-mole. I know you guys are doing lots of work on yourself, but you are, unless you're addressing self-forgiveness, those traits are going to come up like whack-a-mole, and you're going to be like, what? I just dealt with this here. Why is this coming up there? So so what we're doing is we're diminishing shame. We're putting an end to buffering. We're saying no and setting boundaries with that voice, that violent voice inside our heads. We're taking responsibility. We're not blaming other people anymore and pointing fingers and trying to be right while they're wrong. We're not abusing ourselves, and we're not creating an us versus them paradigm. We're talking about a more compassionate world, more compassion for ourselves, more compassion in our communities. So the last step to the forgiveness process is about how we speak to ourselves. Okay, I've talked about transforming that voice of self-doubt into your biggest asset. So how does that work? First of all, I want you guys to get that self-diminishment is not a virtue. Okay, I have many times heard my mother-in-law just mumble to herself, "Oh, you're so stupid," out loud. And I asked her, please do not do that in front of my daughters, because this voice, that the way that we talk to ourselves is a learned behavior. A lot of my clients are just echoing the voice of their mothers or other people inside their head. Remember that self-care, one of the pieces, I had bolded it when I was reading Crystal Nani's definition of self-care, is setting boundaries. And I want you to start setting boundaries with yourself, because too often in, I would say, self-development circles, we talk about this inner voice, this abusive voice that we direct towards ourselves as somehow normal. It's not normal. It is a learned behavior. So set a boundary. So what we're going to do is we're going to transform that voice of self-doubt into your inner mentor. So I want you to think for a second about the best mentor that you've ever had, or someone you would like to be your mentor. I want you to think, what makes them such a fantastic mentor? Thinking about the traits. For me, it's someone who's compassionate, but also doesn't take any shit, who believes in me, but doesn't let me get away with things, but someone who is kind. So I want you to get that. Remember, you are all of it. All of the qualities that you admire in a mentor are also the qualities in you. Debbie Ford says, the saintly and the cynical, the divine and the diabolical, the courageous and the cowardly. They are all aspects that lie dormant within us. When you recognize someone's light, you are seeing yourself. It is in you. You can be the best fucking mentor that you have ever wanted. It's inside you. You just have to admit to it. This is your light. So you ask yourself, this is the last step to any of these different decision tree processes, right? It's the last step in all of them. And that is you turn to your inner mentor and you ask yourself, what would she say to you in this circumstance? How would she help you work through a difficulty? How would she help you learn from your mistakes? How can she help you express yourself in a positive way? So after you've been through the forgiveness process, if you've been triggered by someone else, or whether you've just identified some flaw or offense or mistake in yourself, you're going to get curious. You're going to notice where it is that you're resisting yourself, and you're going to allow yourself forgiveness. You're going to allow yourself to be a whole human being, and then you're going to access the voice of the inner mentor who is going to help you to do better in a loving and compassionate way, because she knows what you are capable of, because you have it all within you. You have the divine, you have the power, you have the courage. It is there, and she knows it. Okay, so I told one of the things that I wanted to do is to offer you some ideas for how to take this further. Okay, so one of the things that can get in the way of using the forgiveness process is being sort of wrapped up in the pattern of approval seeking or avoiding rejection in order to cope with shame. The other thing is that this process takes a lot of courage. So you might need an infusion of courage. So one of the things that I want to remind you is that the opposite of self-forgiveness is shame. We've talked a lot about that. And one of the ways that we cope with shame is because people are our mirrors. So we cope with it by seeking approval. And we also cope with it by avoiding rejection. Now, if we get approval, we think, oh, we're safe. We don't have to look to see where we're ashamed. We're validated temporarily. If we're not getting the approval, then we start to get reminded of our own shame inside of us. And so that's when we start to buffer. And that's when we start to blame either ourselves, or we start to create that us versus them, that right versus wrong. So if you need resources to support you with this, I'm here to tell you about a program that I have. But first of all, what do I mean by approval addiction? Approval addiction is the intense desire to obtain approval in whatever form that could take, or avoid rejection from other people. And then that desire for approval or avoiding rejection results in certain kinds of behaviors that become habitual. So the forgiveness process requires courage, and a lot of us are afraid to be who we are without apology, uncensored. And that's because if you look at, this is from Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And if you look at self-actualization, it's up there at the top. But so many of us, right, we aren't able to reach self-actualization because we just don't feel safe being ourselves. So you want to ask yourself, do you feel safe to be you uncensored? Do you feel safe even to shine your light? With so many people in our culture telling us that you can't be too big for your britches, that you can't be too happy with yourself. So if you do any of this, if you're worried about people knowing the real you, if you rehearse what you're going to say before going into situations, if you're mentally going over things that you said and did after meetings, hoping that you could do it or have said it differently, if you're keeping your opinions to yourself, especially if you know those opinions aren't the same as other people. These are some of the habitual patterns that I talked about. If you avoid asking for help because you can't stand the word no, if you think your life depends on keeping everyone around you happy, if you're constantly trying to achieve so that others will be impressed by your accomplishments, that was a big one for me. If you find yourself stuck when you're afraid you might fail because you don't want to seem to appear weak or incompetent, these are all signs that you have approval issues. Okay, so I want to talk to you about a program that I created. This is my landmark program helping women on a mission who have a real need to make a difference in the world in the way that only they can, to overcome the need for approval and the fear of rejection, to feel safe being themselves uncensored, no apologies. So this course has been taken by over 2,700 people. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to beingamytheblog.com/BYU. Chris McGuffey says, Amy is a courage infuser, filling her clients up with courage without them even understanding how it happened. I believe it's her authenticity, vulnerability, and gentleness in addition to her own contagious courage. So here is what the other side looks like. Can you imagine speaking up without secretly second guessing yourself for days? Stop wasting precious time and energy obsessing over everyone else so you can create the space for your own life. So that you can create a life that is so shiny and sparkly on the inside, it doesn't matter what other people think or say about you. It doesn't matter what the outside looks like. You can begin to find a tribe who values you for the person you really are and not who you pretend to be. You can feel safe being you uncensored, no apologies. You can stop the buffer and blame cycle and quiet the voice of shame. You can transform the voice of self-doubt into your biggest asset. So this program really is for you if you want to really get the most use out of the forgiveness process. So I think it's really important to talk about, like, what would it be worth? I always like to think about putting an actual dollar figure on that. I have a picture of me here, the before and the after. The middle picture is a little fuzzy, but here I am. I'm buffering. I'm hiding shame. I used to create all kinds of drama. There was lots of blaming, lots of judging. Just making everyone in my orbit miserable. I was trying to prove myself. I was really using alcohol to try to be someone else because I didn't like who I was. So I was faking it. And I ended up creating a whole life that didn't fit me. I had a job that didn't fit me. I had a wardrobe that didn't fit me. I read books that didn't interest me. I had friends who didn't really like the real me. What would it be worth to be you, uncensored, without apologies, being brave, being who you are, doing your unique thing in the world, just like I am now? I'm able to help people by being who I really am. What would that be worth? I think for me, I would probably mortgage my house multiple times for that same transformation that I was able to achieve. So what's included in being you uncensored? 7 weeks of video trainings with me. There's class notes, there's worksheets. This is where I'm sharing with you my system for being you uncensored so that you can release the need to please, to step into who you really are and succeed your way. There are 7 weeks of live coaching calls with me. This is spot coaching. This is pep talks. This is lots of fun. This is lots of laughing. We are going to use the forgiveness process together in your own life. There are action challenges because I really like to put a lot of this stuff into action as quickly as possible. Very simple ways to take action to achieve super powerful shifts in a short time. Also, I also give homework assignments. These are things that you do that help to build your awareness and deepen your results. There's an online group. This is where you're going to find a tribe of people who get it, where you get to be yourself. You get to practice being you uncensored in a close-knit community of really supportive people. And then other surprises, because that's just how I roll. Now, I've got some bonuses. The first is a course I created called the Vulnerability Factor. This is where you learn how vulnerability and how being who you are uncensored plays into business, and why does that matter. So that's worth $197. I also do a series of Coaching Revealed classes, and this one is called I Need to Appear Oppressive. And so this is an actual coaching session where I'm coaching someone through this thought. And this is a thought that a lot of people have. I know this was a tough one for me to get through. When you're addicted to approval, and when you're someone who's stuck in that significant seeking pattern. And so this is me coaching someone through, and it also includes a worksheet. So it's really you receiving coaching on this thought through osmosis, and that's $37 value. Now, the next bonus that I'm including is really cool. I have a series of interviews with some of my favorite master coaches, including Martha Beck, my mentor, on the topic of approval addiction. And this is for your success library. These are really, really amazing interviews. Brooke Castillo, Jackie Gartman, Meadow DeVore. These are really available nowhere else on the topic of approval seeking. And this is $197 value. So, and then the other thing that I'm doing is I'm sharing this bonus. This is for you if you're still here. This is for you if you're on the call with me live. You've showed up for yourself. This is a bonus intensive. It's a group intensive live with me, where we are going to use the forgiveness process, and you are going to receive coaching to see how this is showing up for you in your own life. So we're going to uncover how this is working for you. And so this is a bonus, and it's only for you if you're here live on the call. And that's a $397 value. So your investment to participate in the program with me is $297, or it's 2 payments of $177. Keep in mind that the bonus content is valued at $828. So if you would like to read more, if you would like to join, I would love to have you. It's over, you can go to beingamythblog.com/BYU. There's a 1 week money back guarantee for those of you who really feel like that would help you to take that step and invest in yourself. So what is the cost of doing nothing? I think this is also a really valid question. How long are you willing to let this keep going? How long are you willing to continue to take on too much stuff, even if you don't like it? Or try to do better, act better, be better, but nothing changes? How long are you willing to put up with that hamster wheel? Or maybe you do get some praise, but that praise feels good for like a split second until the same thought begins to sink in. What if they find out? What if they only knew the real me? And then that anxiety comes creeping back. And then you're obsessively over preparing for stuff. It's the perfectionist coming out in you. It's not keeping you safe, you guys. What if you keep feeling resentful because nobody seems to notice how hard you work, or how hard you're helping, how hard you're trying to keep everyone around you happy? What if your happiness will continue to depend on how other people treat you, or what other people think about you? How much more buffering and blaming and shaming are you willing to put up with? So ask yourself, what is the cost of doing nothing? So I just want to share something, we've all heard this, but sort of in light with what we've been talking about today, I think this is really powerful. So just in conclusion, it is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. You were born to manifest the glory of God within you. It's not just in some of us, you guys. It's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. We can do it. We can end the shame cycle. We can create a more compassionate environment for ourselves. We can create a more compassionate place for our communities. We can create a more compassionate world for our children. I'm looking at Joy's face in this picture. She's like, stop shaming yourself and forgive. You guys, it has been such an honor to be with you. I hope some of you decide to join me in Being You Uncensored. I would absolutely love to have you. It's going to be a really special program. There's going to be a lot of really fantastic live coaching, as well as some really amazing material that absolutely changed my life. Yay, I'm just looking at the comments. Oh, I love you guys. Does anybody have any questions? I'm gonna, what are the dates of the program? That's a good one. So the program starts this month, not next week. So the first class is available on Monday of next week. Yay, Jen says, I was supposed to be here today. Didn't know it, but boy, was I supposed to be here. I'm clapping, I'm so happy. Okay, I'm gonna stop the share so I can maybe see you guys. Do you guys like my glasses? So yeah. It's just, I am so happy that you guys are here. The program starts on Monday. So that means the first, I can't see anymore, so I'm keeping these on. It starts Monday. So that means that the content, the bonus material, as soon as you join, the bonus material is there for you. The first class drops on Monday. The live coaching will happen every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And all of that is recorded. And so we are going to be meeting once every week for the next 7 weeks live on Wednesdays. So we're going to apply the forgiveness method. We are going to talk about ways that we can overcome our inner approval addict. Yes, thank you, Diane. Unearth the shame. You guys, it's so cool to be here. Do we continue to have access to the info? Yes. So that this info is yours. You have lifetime access to it. So this info is for you. It's recorded. It's all there in a brand new learning site that I've just built. So I'm very excited about it. Lots of really fantastic video content. So yeah, Kathy, hopefully that answers your question. Anybody else? The other thing too is I'm gonna be sending you a freebie after today's call. It's called 50 Badass Things to Say to Yourself in Your Head, because we talk about positive self-talk. You are so welcome, Patty. Thanks for being here. But we don't often feel like we're very good at it. And so, right, this is a muscle we need to build. It's not that some people are just naturals at it. It's like anything. It's like you have to practice it. And so, so I'm going to be sending you some suggestions. It's called 50 Badass Ways to Talk to Yourself in Your Head. And I go through certain like scenarios, like maybe you're not feeling very good about yourself. And I'm going to give you some suggestions for things that inner mentor can say to you. You guys, I am so happy you're here. Anybody else have any questions? Yay! Oh, Jen, I'm so happy that you're excited for that that freebie. All it takes is one thing to screw up some serious badassery. I can't wait to get it. Yeah, you know, and it's great. You guys can add. I've left space because there's lots of things that you could be saying to yourself that is seriously badass. But these, you know, you can visit my headspace because these are things that I like to say to myself. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you share some additions, some things that you would like to add. Any other questions? Again, you guys, let's see, maybe I'll put the link in here. http beingamytheblog.com Being You Uncensored, BYU. So if you're thinking of joining me, get on it. We are going to have so much fun. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I'm going to infuse you with courage. It's going to change your life. And we're going to be using the forgiveness process. So I really hope to see some of you over there. Anybody else have any questions? I see some of you are still hanging out. Anybody have any questions about what we talked about? All right, well, then I am going to stop the recording. I'm going to thank you guys again for being here. Please spread the word. I'm actually probably going to be teaching this a few more times this week, live. So if you'd like to come, just stay tuned. Stay on your email list if you'd like to come in and join me again, or if you'd like to share it with your friends. Help us to put an end to this shame culture. Share it with your friends. You know, just stay tuned, okay? Thank you guys. I'm going to stop the recording.